It's that time of the week to open up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag in week 6. And of course, a lot of people making a lot of noise and a lot of questions about the New York Jets fallout there. What's next for the Jets? What's it mean for the Jets now? New reporting on the New York Jets and the Robert Saleh firing and how involved Aaron Rodgers was and how good is Jayden Daniels and so much more. We're ranking rookie wide receivers, by the way, redrafting that. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the mailbag questions come every week. So hit us up there. You can also drop a question in the YouTube comments, and appreciate all the everydayers who are already subscribed, and welcome to all the new listeners to Peacock and Williamson every week. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. All right, big topic of the week. Robert Saleh fired after 5 weeks for the New York Jets as they get ready for Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills with a chance for a piece of first place in the AFC East. And we have multiple questions about this, and most of it revolves around some interesting conspiracies. And are they conspiracies? Are they not? So I find this really interesting, Matt. And if we go to Joey Bag of Donuts, who's always involved in the mailbag, appreciate all the frequent mailbaggers here. It says, if the Jets let Aaron Rodgers do whatever he wants with the organization and he retires in a year, where does that leave the organization? And it's a great question, but according to the reporting, and I want to see if this passed the smell test for you, Matt, because according to the reporting, Aaron Rodgers had nothing to do with this, and he was as blindsided as Robert Saleh was about the firing. But owner Woody Johnson, who said it was my decision, my sole decision to do this, had a phone call with Aaron Rodgers before firing Robert Saleh. So do you think it was all Woody Johnson just gathering information? Do you think Aaron Rodgers maybe sunk Saleh incidentally, not realizing that he would possibly be fired right after the phone call if he didn't say, oh, he is the guy to lead us to a Super Bowl? And I just find it fascinating that Robert Saleh went into business in the morning to try to fix what was wrong with the team and was going to make the change at offensive coordinator. And then 5 minutes later finds out he's fired instead. So basically the question is Aaron Rodgers actually running things, and or is it just bad ownership? Like what, or is it both?
Bad ownership allows a player to have that kind of pull. You know, I mean, back to the question, and we'll get to all that stuff too. That's exactly the issue. I mean, Rodgers has nothing invested, and even if he's phenomenal and they win every game from here on out, he still might not be back next year. I mean, he can turn his back on this whole football thing and live in a cave and eat mushrooms or host Jeopardy or do whatever he does or run for president or whatever he feels like doing at the drop of a hat. He could do it tomorrow. You know, I mean, he could do it whenever he wants and has no long-term investment in the Jets or their future or their well-being in 2026 and 2027. That's dangerous. That's really dangerous. And that goes back to even their offseason. All the old dudes that they signed and all his buddies they signed are all short-term fixes. There's not a lot of long-term answers in that building, and there definitely isn't one a quarterback. So this team will likely bottom out, and I don't think it is a necessarily good job for the guys that are going to be up in the offseason for all those reasons. So yeah, I think it's very poor ownership. I think most teams would not have handed the keys of the car to Rodgers. It would have been more of a, yeah, you're along for the ride, and we do respect your opinion and your output, but I'm not going to run and get all your buddies, especially your offensive coordinator that's running a system that is old and antiquated, you know, and everybody's figured out how to attack it. They have not, I heard someone saying like it's an iPhone 2. I mean, it's Microsoft 2.0. It's never updated.
And it's like the plus version is like, oh, this was the best one when it came out.
Oh, yeah.
15 years
And
ago.
Rodgers was killing it with it,
Yeah.
10 years ago. But now everyone knows how to fight it, and attack it, especially the protections.
Is it possible that they still made the right decision and that Robert Saleh is not a great head coach? Because I'm looking at this.
Maybe.
I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers throwing, and we talked about in the past. Remember your thing about Aaron Rodgers where it was like, okay, he's got one of the best highlight tapes in NFL history of a quarterback. He's also got one of the best low light tapes because he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He was making bad throws. Like, hard to put that on Robert Saleh too, because like, okay, head coach, you're in charge of everything, so it's your fault. I'm going to blame you on it. You can't just coach the defense. You have to be in charge of the offense. If offense is bad, that's still on the head coach. So I get that, but he was actually trying to fix that 5 minutes before he was fired, and
right.
That's pretty short leash to even change offensive coordinator too. But owner Woody Johnson in his statement talked about how this was kind of he was thinking about this for a while. So he might not have fully believed in his head coach even coming into the year, which now adds up. And if that's the case, why didn't you make a move before the year starts? And I look at the Devontae Adams situation with the Raiders, similar to this, is like, if you like, how can you do this so early? And what is going to, like, do you think this is actually so you thought it was like, well, I'm not sold on this coach, but I'm going to let him have a couple of games. And it's like, oh, that didn't go well, so now I'm going to fire him. But that's going to make it better for us. You know what I mean?
It's like the Raiders, it's not like they're winless.
And it's not like the Raiders couldn't see any of this coming. Like, you couldn't trade Devontae Adams 2 months ago or 9 months ago. Like, all of a sudden you realize
probably got more for him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And so I just question everything from the top down with these organizations. Like, why is this the time to be making these decisions? And like, and it's possible that Woody Johnson just did this completely on his own and Aaron Rodgers wasn't involved, which I think is also insane.
Which is also insane too.
And the GM might not have been involved. He just was on a flight home and he was mad because he was embarrassed in front of his ambassador buddies. And he's like, I'm going to fire a head coach because I have that power. It just seems like bad decision making. Talking to the
Cleveland
people,
with these two organizations
too. Yeah.
I mean, Cleveland and the Jets and the Raiders. I mean, one guy has too much power and they've earned it. They can do whatever they want. It's their sandbox. They can do whatever they want, but it's not a good business model for the NFL.
What's rough for those teams is, this is, they've been such a model of consistency for so long, those organizations.
Sure. A lot of Super Bowl trophies too.
Cleveland, so the hardware that those teams have put together in the last 25 years is pretty.
Since Al Davis passed, or even the last 10 years of Al Davis was a nightmare. I mean, it may be more. I mean, really, since the 80s. Josiah
says, how long until the Jets announce Bill Belichick as their new head coach?
I don't think he'd want it.
Yeah.
But you could have had him in the offseason. And then what would this look like? You know what I mean?
Right. If he would have been willing to take the job.
Yeah.
Did they go hard after him? Did they go after him at all? Were there some back channel conversations? I don't know. I tend to think Bill Belichick, how long until they announce Bill Belichick as their head coach? I don't know, in 4 years after he's done coaching somewhere else again. I don't know, because I don't think he's going to end up with the Jets this offseason either. So, I think Belichick would want a better organization. I mean, he had a chance to be the Jets head coach if he wanted it.
Yeah, and that was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of losses since, and he's beat that team so many times since then. And, last note I really have on the dynamics of it, though, and I mentioned this Tuesday, I don't know how this makes it any better for 2024. Like, I hope Jeff Ulbrich goes on to be a wonderful coach and win Super Bowls some year, but he really is hardly qualified to take over the ship now. And if the offense is the problem, which it is, he's just going to let the guys that are in there have even more reign. You know what I mean?
For sure. Now we have a situation where Aaron Rodgers runs the offense and Jeff Ulbrich runs the defense.
Yeah.
And Woody Johnson,
the game day stuff. I don't know.
Woody Johnson saying to himself, well, the defense isn't going to get worse because we get to keep our play caller on defense and the scheme's already there. And that's already in place. And who knows? Maybe something else. I don't know what you expect to get better on offense from firing the head coach in this situation either.
Like, what are Albrecht's press conferences in New York City with 9 million press members going to be look like in week 10 when they're asking him questions about the offense that he can't quite answer, and they're 2-8, and Rodgers is saying crazy stuff. And
I actually think more of Ulbrich than that. I think Ulbrich is a guy that would probably, could have been on a short list of head coach opportunities, and certainly
I'm not picking on him.
He'll get snapped up quickly as a defensive coordinator, I think, in the NFL this offseason when the whole staff changes. And I think it's almost like, I wonder this, like how many interim coaches go on to have really good and successful coaching careers the rest of the way? It feels like an interim thing is something you wouldn't even want in a lot of cases.
Right, like it's a death sentence.
In this weird category. Like, would it be crazy if Jeff Ulbricht's like, nah, I don't want to be an interim coach. I want to be the coach. Because if you look at interim, like I'm trying to think of someone who was an interim coach that became like a great head coach, because usually the interim,
sure there's a few examples, but very few.
Right. And it almost puts you in a category of you're the interim guy.
I mean, it's like, all right, you're kind of a new swimmer. Here's this really heavy dumbbell. Grab it, jump in the deep end, and come back up. You know what I mean? Like, save us all, right? And then save the other drowning people in the deep end with you while you hold this dumbbell,
Anyways, curious, a lot of questions. Maybe they'll get that interim bump, though. And who knows? Maybe Jeff Ulbrich coaches this thing so well, and I think he'll be fine in front of the media. I think he's a stand-up guy. I think he's a smart coach. I think he's a really good coach. So maybe they do get this thing figured out, and Jeff Ulbrich ends up sticking around as the head coach there for the Jets. I have my doubts, but they got an opportunity against the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football. We'll make the picks for that game tomorrow. Let's talk rookie wide receivers, check in on how they're doing to start their careers, maybe even re-rank how we draft them now that we've seen a few games worth of these rookies. And Jayden Daniels, speaking of rookies, he's a top quarterback in the NFL already. All that and more coming up in the rest of the mailbag, Peacock and Williamson style. A new sponsor here of Peacock and Williamson and the Locked On Podcast Network, and it is ZBiotics. And I'm excited for this one because I've used ZBiotics, and you know what? Bottom line is it works. And how does it work? Don't really know. Let's see if we can figure this out together, because I am not a PhD and I'm not a scientist, but ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. This byproduct, not dehydration, is what's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow or the next day. And my tomorrow did feel better. I tried the ZBiotic, and it was a great way to tell my wife, was like, look, this is for work, and I need to know how this stuff works. So we're going to tie it on, and I'm going to be responsible about it. But I maybe even had an extra one that I thought I might have not had on this evening. And guess what? I felt great. I was dancing around the next morning. It felt phenomenal. So ZBiotics works, and all you got to do is go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the place to buy tickets for NFL football games, college football games, playoff baseball games, concerts, comedy shows, theater events, whatever it is near you. Game Time is the place, and you can get phenomenal last-minute ticket deals on Game Time. And now Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. So, let's say you're trying to buy a ticket for an NFL game. You're seeing some phenomenal deals. Maybe you're seeing too many deals and you can't figure out which picks you want. So Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets in some of these big venues, whether it's a NFL game or a concert, whatever it is. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save even more money. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, you got your list ready, Matt?
I do.
All right, Matt is re-ranked rookie wide receivers. I'm going to completely crush and dismantle his list if this goes well. And if it goes poorly, we're going to just completely agree.
Okay.
And you know what? We talk too much to each other because I think we agree a little bit too much. But this is an interesting one for me. And the question is from
Not easy.
JDS. As of now, how would you redraft the receiver class if that draft was held today? So we've seen, look, sample's too small. We've only seen 5 weeks of these rookie wide receivers. Does a lot fundamentally change for you for this rookie class? Because we've seen a lot of good, and we've seen some quiet starts for some of these rookie wide receivers, especially the ones drafted high.
Yeah, and it's a really good exercise, and I could understand a lot of people having issues with my list. And it's not an easy thing to do because, you know, I'm going to still put a lot of weight on what I thought of these guys before I saw them in the NFL. But I still think you have to respect their pedigree, and not everyone just bursts on the scene. But Nabers is one for me. I'm taking Nabers ahead of anybody. I mean, he's a remarkable player. And really the gap between him and Marvin Harrison on draft day was pretty narrow to begin with. Do you agree that he's one?
They were only 2 picks apart.
Yeah.
I think that I would not change my rankings, which is still Harrison over Nabers. It might have grown the gap after Nabers just because they've both been as advertised, and Malik Nabers has been absolutely dynamic. But I loved what I've seen from Marvin Harrison too, and he's walked in and been kind of a pro from not from week 1, from week 2. There was questions about him week 1, then week 2.
Yeah, he was too slow. Yeah.
Two touchdowns in the first quarter. So like, oh yeah, never mind. He's cool. I wouldn't change it, but they're clearly 1 and 2, and they're both so good and can have really long, good NFL careers. Malik Nabers already coming up hurt though, and he's the smaller of the receivers. I don't love that. So you know that maybe
I factored that in. Yeah,
Marvin Harrison as well. So you would go Nabers. Is Harrison 2 on your list still?
Yeah, and I think they're clearly 1 and 2.
Yeah,
and I'd be thrilled with either, but it would be Nabers just because I've seen better stuff in the NFL.
He is more explosive. Like he is.
Yes.
But that was kind of his thing coming out. I was like, man, this guy's a really explosive wide receiver. He's been able to handle a lot of targets. Like you could run your offense through him as your wide receiver 1, which you have to be excited for if you're a Giants fan, and especially if they ever find a good quarterback.
100%. Now at 3, I went with Thomas in Jacksonville. I am blown away with this guy, and he's not just size, speed, but he's also production. He's quickly become their number 1. I've heard him being described as like a better version, a more consistent version of Martavis Bryant, you know, which is a compliment to me. Bryant was a remarkable talent. He was just
if Martavis Bryant's head was screwed on right. I mean, that guy was going to be awesome. By the way, I don't want to detour this too far. How are the Steelers so good at drafting talented wide receivers that are also screwballs?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. Well, there's no art to actually making the draft. It's dealing with them after, which they're not getting as good at, to be honest with you. But that's the MO. You messed up in the head and super talented. You're for us. He's my 3, but I felt bad having a Dunze 4. Dunze's an awesome prospect, and he's flashed, but Thomas has been better than advertised.
Yeah. I think having a veteran quarterback has helped Thomas, and I think there's not as many targets for Odunze. So it was just going to be like, at best, if everybody's healthy, you get to be the number 3. And then, you know, we have seen Keenan Allen get hurt. So then he was the number 2. And then it was like, okay, he put up some really nice numbers in 1 week, but he just hasn't had quite the opportunity. And you have the growing pains of your quarterback on top of it, which has hurt him. And again, this is one of those where I would probably err on saying, I just think the complete nature of every level of the field, Odunze is going to be a better player and has had a little tougher time showcasing everything he can do in the NFL because of his situation, even though I think it might actually end up being a really good situation for him. It's just a little bit harder to show that in the first 5 weeks. So I actually think the top 4 guys, I would keep them exactly the same. And I think maybe Nabers got a little closer to Harrison, and maybe Thomas got a little closer to Odunze. But I think 1 through 4, Harrison, Nabers, Odunze, Thomas. I wouldn't change the order. Maybe I would change, how quickly they got snapped up and where they got snapped up in some cases. And I think the returns of all those guys have been really good. And I think Brian Thomas is. I think the big bonus is you're not sitting here thinking, "Oh man, this team might have screwed up with their guy."
Right.
In those top 4 picks, because Brian Thomas, what did he do in college? What did you think he was going to be able to do? Woo, he showed that, and you saw it last week. He had a long one. It's like, okay, yeah, that's the guy. And I think you've been able to say that about all of these players so far, which is a great sign for the Cards, the Giants, the Bears, and the Jaguars.
And like many, this is a knock on Thomas, but on draft day, I thought there was a clear top 3. Now I think there's a clear top 4.
Mm-hmm. And the league thought there was a clear top 3 because there was a dozen picks between, more than that, 14 picks between Odunze, who went top 10, and Brian Thomas, who fell all the way to number 23. And actually, he fell a little bit further than a lot of people thought. Maybe because they thought he was a little bit more one-dimensional, which is still, it's like, okay, let's see him operate a little short and intermediate a little bit more. But he's passed his first test with flying colors, and he's really good, phenomenally talented. And great job, teams, hitting on those wide receivers so far. I think there's going to be good returns on all these guys.
McConkey is my next one.
Oh, this is where it gets difficult.
This is where it gets tougher.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought he was really trending the right direction before his bye, and I think he comes out of the bye and blows up.
McConkey has shown that he is what you thought as far as quickness, getting open. Mm-hmm. But is that enough to be like, okay, this guy's going to be a star wide receiver, superstar wide receiver? I think that's why he ended up getting drafted in the second round. It was ended up 34 overall, and 8 receivers went ahead of him. So I'm not ready to put him that I would draft him against ahead of the other guys, but you like that, kind of like the first 4 you're talking about. Okay, you're starting to see the scouting report on the field. So I feel comfortable saying he's got a high floor. How high is the ceiling for McConkey? I'm not sure, but I don't think he's going to be a miss for the Chargers, which is a great sign. And you can't really say that for some of the guys between, the Worthy, Pearsall, Leggett, Coleman. Those are the other guys that went in front of McConkey. I don't know if you can say that yet about those guys. Not that you can say that they're busts. And with Ricky Pearsall, we just haven't seen him play yet. So we have no idea what that's going to look like.
But I'm holding that against Pearsall, for this exercise. Just have more information on the others now.
Well, and they were drafted, in
the same neighborhood too. Yeah.
5 picks apart, right? Because Worthy was 28, and then 31 was Pearsall. Then the next pick, 32, was Leggett. And then the next pick, Keon Coleman, was the first pick in the second round, and then McConkey was the second pick in the second round, and then the 5th pick was Jalen Polk. So those guys were all in, half a dozen picks of each other.
Yep. So they were all in the same bucket to begin with.
So to say this guy's he looks like you're going to hit on him, and just not knowing is enough for you to put him ahead. And
I just have more information.
And they're actually kind of similar, right? You wonder about their play strength. They might be best in the slot. They're really slippery and quick at getting open. It's like, okay, we've seen it from him. We haven't seen it from him yet. Already dealing with some injuries, and that's gunshot wound aside.
I say he got shot, yeah.
Ricky Pearsall, but he's had the shoulder all camp long, and so and play strength is kind of the question there. So it's like, okay, McConkey, injury questions. He's passing some tests. Pearsall hasn't passed the same test. If they were back to back for you, you say, okay, I've already seen it from McConkey. Give me McConkey. I totally get it. Question is, you have McConkey over Worthy, Coleman, and Leggett.
Yes, and I have them actually in that order. I go McConkey, Worthy, Leggett, Coleman, Pearsall. And it's not Pearsall's fault. It's just all the other guys have done things in the NFL that I respect and I'm excited about,
I mean, if instead of the Combine and the Senior Bowl, you had 5 NFL weeks,
right? That's what
teams would be better at drafting players,
right? Exactly. Yeah. Or if Pearsall missed the last 8 games of his college career, his last season, I just don't know.
Okay, I can't fight you on that one. And after McConkey is, what's the order again?
Worthy, Leggett, and Coleman were basically the same. Pearsall.
No fences here. Leggett or Coleman?
Worthy, Coleman, Leggett, Pearsall will be my final answer.
Yep. Would you put Adonai Mitchell ahead of any of them? Jalen
almost. He's the only one that's on the list. I only went as far as Mitchell. He was next, and I considered him over Pearsall too.
A quick note here. Adonai Mitchell is number one amongst these rookie wide receivers at separation win rates. He's got a 29% win rate right now, number one of rookie wide receivers. And there has been flashes there, and his quarterback situation has been really weird. And I might actually take Adonai Mitchell maybe 5 on this list based on what I've seen.
I like him a lot.
5 games. And by the way, number 2 is Jalen Polk. Number 3, Marvin Harrison. Number 4, Luke McCaffrey.
Polk would probably be my next name that didn't make my sheet.
There you go. That's redrafting the rookie wide receivers after 5 weeks. I think there is important information to learn from some of these wide receivers. In some cases, we just have no idea. And it'll be fun to check in a couple of years, or who knows, maybe after the season. Let us know if you want us to, and hit us with one of those questions. Next, Jayden Daniels. He is a top what quarterback already in the NFL? The final segment of our Peacock and Williamson mailbag is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. NFL fans right now can start the season with a big return on FanDuel and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You want to bet on Jayden Daniels to be Rookie of the Year? You want to bet on the Washington Commanders to win the Super Bowl potentially? You can find all those bets and so much more at FanDuel and get 200 extra bonus dollars to play with your first $5 bet. And by the way, when you're sitting there Sunday watching Monday Night Football, Thursday night watching football games, and you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can go check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the very same page where you're placing your bets at FanDuel.com. So go to FanDuel.com or download the app and get America's #1 sports book and play with an extra free $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place that first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Jayden Daniels, this one from Michael. Jayden Daniels is a top what quarterback right now as we sit here today? Are the Commanders actually a playoff team? And what a turnaround. Gotta love the NFL. It's amazing what you can do with the right quarterback. And it's amazing what you can do in the other direction too. Like the NFL is chaos, it's crazy. And it can flip weekly too. We're like, man, this team looked like garbage for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden like, oh no, they figured something out. They looked good this week, Matt. So could that possibly happen to the young rookie quarterback as well and maybe hit some stumbles? Obviously, Jayden Daniels passed the test with flying colors right now. And by the way, we just redrafted wide receivers. Would you redraft Jayden Daniels after what you've seen #1 instead of #2?
Not yet. But the way this question is phrased, it's really hard to say he's better than these 20 established quarterbacks because the book is still so far from written. And that includes Anthony Richardson. Like, we're on chapter 1. And so to tell me he's better than Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford and like,
Has a friend ever told you about a TV show and you're like, oh man, I saw this show and I didn't really get into it? He's like, oh, you just wait. You gotta, first couple episodes are a little slow. It gets really good towards the middle of season 1. It gets really awesome. Oh, wait till the end of season 1. Season 2 is unbelievable, right? You have those, like that's the story of an NFL quarterback. And again, I always talk about how development curves are not linear, especially for quarterbacks in the NFL. And there's peaks and there's valleys, and it's going straight up right now for Jayden Daniels, and he's been phenomenal. But if we ask the question like it's a draft again, though, you say, hey, would you draft Jayden Daniels or Trevor Lawrence today? I'd take Jayden Daniels.
Yeah. I wouldn't take him over Stroud, but I would I'm not sure about Caleb Williams at this moment, but I probably would take Daniels, kind of like the receiver conversation we've had. At least I have a lot of good stuff to go off of, But in terms of who would you rather play against today, this week, there's maybe 8 names ahead of him, or in terms of who I would not want to play against, Lamar, Allen, Mahomes, Burrow.
So what I'm hearing, Matt, is that Jayden Daniels is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL.
Playing like it right now. They've also had a pretty darn easy slate of defenses, which is bound to get more difficult, but super impressive. Really hard to play against. I don't think his supporting cast is carrying him. I think it's more the other way around, which is a huge compliment. So I think he's in the top 10 of who I don't want to play against.
There you go. Jayden Daniels, top 10 quarterback in the NFL, according to Matt Williamson at Williamson NFL. Is there a lack of playmakers in the NFL? We just talked about young quarterbacks, young wide receivers.
I don't think so.
John says, if you look at most teams, there seems to be a dearth of true playmakers. Is this because they are not coming out of college ranks in the same numbers as they have in the past? Or is it better defense, worse offense, coaching? And this is a Steelers fan who gives the Steelers as an example, not enough offensive playmakers right now. What you're telling John is it's just a Steelers problem, and the rest of the
you
league
need to watch the other 31 teams. We just talked about a lot of good young receivers. Roman Wilson wasn't one of them. I mean, he hasn't got to play either. No, I don't think there's any lack of playmakers coming to the league at all.
I think defense's number one goal in the modern era is to stop those playmakers in a way that it limits the big plays that can happen. And I think it's the biggest thing that happens from college to the NFL, especially for those playmakers, is you get that like the Reggie Bush thing, right? Reggie Bush gets to the NFL. Guess what? You don't get to just double back and make teams look silly and spin moves like you played with Fresno State. That's not what's going to happen. Peter Warrick was another one. The way he played in college is like, oh man, what a playmaker. Comes in the NFL and is like, guess what? You just lost yards on that punt return because these guys are fast now. And you can't just run around guys like they're silly. So when someone is able to make it look like that on the NFL level, that's a special ability. And there's tons of great athletes and playmakers right now, I think, throughout the league. But I think to answer his question, you're not seeing as many video game plays because the defenses are designed to stop that. And the defenses are coming from the top down, letting you catch in front of it and then make a tackle on a play.
And the defenses are super athletic too.
They're freaks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. No lack of playmakers, except for the Pittsburgh Steelers and wide receiver one, 5'7", 170 pounds right now. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen. Appreciate all the questions we get every week on Peacock and Williamson. We love them. Apologies for the questions we did not get to this week. Keep them coming, though, at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back Friday, making picks for the rest of week 6 right here, Peacock and Williamson.